Most people don't give a shit about your vision, right? They do not care unless that is what enables them, by achieving that vision, enables them to achieve their own vision for themselves. I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer.
This is Jessica, Head of Coaching Strategy at Crisp, and today we're flipping the script for another special edition episode to get Michael's take on how to strategically prepare your firm for a successful transition or succession, identifying and developing the right leader to take the reins of your firm, and how to future-proof your firm so it thrives for years to come.
Not everyone wants to take over your business. Not everyone wants to deal with your problems. But then there's people who really do. If you ignore this, you're going to find yourself in a situation where it's like you don't know what to do. You don't have confidence in anyone. And then you're like, oh, shit, man, I got to sell it.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. All right. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Another MMA. I'm excited for this one, Jessica. I'm excited for every time we do one. Every time we do one. Because we never know what the questions are going to be. We never know what the answers are going to be. So thank you guys for tuning in to this week's AMMA. And I was thinking, actually recently, I don't do a whole lot of thinking, right? So this was a recent thing. And it's like, what are the traits that I can see in an individual where I'm like, they're going to be successful. Like they're going to win. They're going to figure it out. And there's a lot. I mean, there's all sorts of things. Obviously, like there's, the ones that are the courageous, and there's going to be the ones that are very decisive, things like that. But even when we're talking about not just in entrepreneurs or in leaders, but even team members, is when I come across someone and I can tell that they're innately curious. They're an avid learner, right? And I don't mean learning in the academic sense of because there's a difference here between learning to gain new skills and then being an information consumer. Because if you go too far down that direction, it's like you read every book and you attend every conference, but you never quite seem to
take action.
And yet you know everything. You just haven't executed on it.
Yeah.
But I will say that those that are very curious, I'll say in even in certain team members, I know someone's going to be great when I can tell that they also read and listen to podcasts in their field. Like they're just constantly learning and growing. And those that don't do those things, they believe that maybe whatever they learned up to that point
good enough
is sufficient, right? But man, things change, things evolve. Like you don't want to wait until, the world hits you over the head with a forcing function of now you need to learn and change or you're going to be obsolete, right? Like old toys in the factory, right? That's it. They're going to get rid of you. So
literally had a team member Slack me yesterday and she's like, I'm coming in this weekend. I have to get better at AI. I have to.
Yeah.
And that's like her focus. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't wait until the machines have taken over before you start learning ChatGPT or Claude or, DeepSeek or any of these things. And you're like, well, where do I begin? It's like, well, you have to be curious. There's all the information's out there. You can just start messing around with it, start doing different prompts. Again, you don't have to wait for the class, right? Of saying, well, I enrolled and, I'm going to go and, somewhere in, this fall, I'll start to learn about this. And it's like, well, if that's the way you learn, then you're going to learn very slowly. But, when we're interviewing someone, and I learn or ask them, like, how did you, become an expert in the space? Like the best answer they can give me, best answer. It's like, yeah, I watched YouTube videos in my free time. I just learned to code. Then I learned Python. And then I started creating, whatever. I'm like, awesome. This person's going to learn. They're going to adapt.
Yeah. We had a cinematographer once. He literally taught himself everything on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Never went to film school and he was phenomenal.
Fantastic. Yeah. Exactly. I wish academia focused more on this because my favorite class from college, it wasn't organic chemistry. It was this class that I took. It was an elective, and it was called Learning to Learn.
Yes.
Man, that was my favorite class I ever took. Probably the most valuable thing that I gained in college was taking that class of Learning to Learn. It's like, how do we learn things, right? How do we process information? How do we actually memorize things? How do we actually apply different principles to it? Because you can read a book and you can highlight a bunch of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to internalize that or actually start acting on that. And now when I go about just any sort of like reading and any sort of insights. I mean, constantly, it really is 24/7, 24/7 consuming content. That whether it's like right now, obviously it's a lot of it's focused on like tech and AI and being able to leverage that. It's just, how do you take this information and then apply it? And it's being able to like shorten that gap between the time in which you either read something and then you're actually taking action on it. So there's like the application of it, and then the highest level of learning is teaching it to somebody else, right? So if you can teach it, then you obviously know it at a high level. That's the class that everybody needs to take, learning to learn. And if you are innately curious, then you're always going to be evolving. And you don't want to be one of these people where the world is not going to wait for you to catch up. And you don't want to be at a place where you're at a significant competitive disadvantage because you think, well, I don't need to learn that, or it's just a fad, right? Some things are fads. I don't think AI is one of them, for example. I think AI is really changing the future of work, and it's not the AI that will take you out. It's going to be the law firm owners that are leveraging AI in their practice, because you simply won't be able to compete. So again, it's not going to be the machines that get you, right? Or the robots. I mean, maybe in the distant future, potentially. But
with that,
for now, it's those that are actually leveraging those insights. And again, our best firms, the ones that are growing the quickest, the ones that are leading these amazing practices, they are the learn-it-alls, not the know-it-alls. Anyway, just what questions do we have this week
right, so
on the AMMA?
Let's jump right in. Question number 1. Michael, I've run my law firm for 20 years plus, and I'm starting to consider selling the firm. How do I prepare for a successful exit?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because it's interesting. So when firms come to us, it's really with the goal of, I would say, typically one of two things. Either they want to build a massively valuable practice that they later sell for a large amount of money, and then they retire or do however they want to spend their time, or they want to build a massively valuable practice that they keep and that they are able to remain a part of, and it's profitable, and they continue to grow it, and they just enjoy the game, right? They enjoy growing the business. And then they're also considering like a succession plan and what does the future look like and legacy, and et cetera. So when it comes to thinking about a successful exit in this case, it's really looking at it from the standpoint of successful generally means, how do I get as much money as possible for what I've built, right? Now, you may define this in different ways, but just for the purpose of this, this question, let's just say, how do you maximize the value of your firm? The harsh truth is that there's typically a disconnect between what you believe your firm is worth and what somebody else is willing to pay. And usually they're willing to pay less than you believe your firm is worth, significantly less. But let's really dissect why. So let's think about it. Let's answer it almost like the opposite way of what would make for a very valuable law firm that someone would pay a large amount of money, for, and it would be a firm that does not need you in any way, that is not dependent at all on the firm owner, that has processes in place for every single aspect of the firm. Things are repeatable, that has, a great, like, let's say, leadership team in place, that has metrics and key performance indicators, that it has great cash flow, that has predictable case acquisition, that has a strong brand, that has a strong community presence. You add up all these different factors, a great hiring process, great training, great onboarding, and you're like, okay, great, that's valuable.
Right.
So if you don't have any of those things, then
probably won't be successful.
You're probably not going to have as great of an exit as you hope. And this is also assuming you can find a buyer, right? So It's at this point probably another firm owner, right? Or, potentially private equity, right? Depending on what that looks like. But it really is just considering that if you don't have any of those pieces in place, and let's say your firm is largely dependent on you, and meaning that if you don't show up, does the firm continue to grow, and can it continue to grow and scale? Or then let's say you're heavily dependent on one type of marketing for all of your business. Like, let's say you rely solely on whether it's referrals and word of mouth, for example, or even let's say you rely solely on pay-per-click, or LSAs,
right?
Like those two things. When someone's coming in to buy the firm, they were not going to put a whole lot of value on that simply because they could just spend the money and acquire those cases through pay-per-click or LSAs. So why would they put a premium on it if they're going to have to spend the money to get the cases anyway?
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, what do you really have, right? And you have perhaps your case inventory, right? Maybe that, to some degree, depending on if you have like a physical space, like an office, you have desks and chairs, but, again, not a whole lot of value there. And then whether it's even, whether your existing team will even stay on, or whether they're, like, if you got great lawyers, that's one thing. Why would they continue to stay on with the firm? So it's really considering, like, would you buy your practice? Like, would you pay a significant premium for it, like a significant multiple? If your firm's not very profitable, probably not going to get a whole lot for it. But at the same time, you could be an attractive acquisition target because firms love to buy. I mean, we work with a lot of firms that have acquired other law firms, and they love to find firms that are, let's say they're doing several million in revenue, but aren't very profitable and aren't very efficient or aren't very well optimized, because they can bring those systems in place and they can bring that infrastructure in place and say, look, they're already generating this top line revenue, then it's an efficiency play. And we can extract more profit from this firm by just putting in better systems and better processes and, et cetera. If they're having to rebuild the entire law firm, then really the only value is potentially your case inventory, which, I mean, again, sometimes you're not even going to get any money up front. They'll just pay, basically when the case is settled, they give you a portion of the fees.
Yeah.
They can put you out of your misery and you can get out of there. But if you're thinking, man, I'm going to get several million bucks, probably not. Not unless you built a firm that is self-managing and predictable and is also not relying on any one source of business. Let's say it's like, well distributed. You have multiple sources of business. Brand is huge because, with brand, you can, it's just the quality of the cases that are coming in, the average case value, what that looks like, how optimized the firm is already. This is exactly what we focus on in the coaching program. I mean, quite literally, it's like we go through every single business area, whether it's leadership or culture or marketing or operations, and be able to figure out how do we answer yes to all these questions of making the firm not dependent on you and having predictability in place and having a great cash flow forecast and having the firm be profitable and also having great leadership and metrics and processes. And this can take years to put in place. It's not an overnight effort, but what happens is when you do all these things, you find yourself at a place where you have options. So now you can, if you want to, sell your firm because you're going to probably be an attractive firm to buy, or if your firm has great leadership in place and great systems and great processes and it's highly profitable, it's like, well, and you're not necessary, you can also keep the thing, right? And you can continue to grow it and scale it because it's a profitable business and maybe you just enjoy that aspect of growing it and it produces great cash flow for you as well. And then you can start thinking about how am I going to pass this firm along? What does the succession plan look like? And even if you're not even there, you can still retain ownership of the firm. The same things that are necessary, depending whatever route you go, whether you decide to sell, whether you decide to, just to keep the firm or pass it along, the same principles really do apply of building a firm that's not dependent on you.
100%. Yeah. And that'll move us right into question number 2. So over the past few years, I've gone from solo to now a team of more than 15. We recently broke through the 7-figure mark, but as I look ahead, I ask myself, how do I balance firm growth with maintaining a healthy culture?
I sometimes think when someone asks this question, it's either they read something on LinkedIn or they don't have what it takes. But I will answer it in a valid way.
Yeah.
I mean, the simplest way to be able to balance firm growth with maintaining a healthy culture.
What is healthy?
So again, it's like, how do you want to define that? Just don't be very ambitious and don't set very high growth targets. You just do it slow. If your priority is to not stress anybody out. But then again, like you were just saying, what is healthy? Right? We all have different definitions of healthy. If I step into an organization, everybody's complacent and things move at a snail's pace and the organization is becoming increasingly less competitive and the phone's ringing less and less, no one's stressed out, everyone's fine and they're jolly and they're bringing the dog in the office and it's like a petting zoo. But the firm is about to go out of business and everyone's about to get laid off. That to me is not healthy. Alternatively, you can go into another environment where everything's at a high level and they're pushing really ambitious growth goals and there can be a lot of stress, but the people there are also obsessed and they're incredibly talented and they're incredibly collaborative and they like solving difficult problems. And you can look at that and say toxic workplace, but there is going to be people that are just so driven and so committed to their personal growth, their professional growth, that's the only environment they're going to thrive in. So that could be healthy. What is a good culture versus a bad culture? I mean, the answer can vary. It's what is right for you. To me, if I had to answer it, I would say that good culture, however you define it, is if your team is aligned in a way in terms of the values and beliefs and the standards that enables the firm to achieve its growth goals, right? If that's happening, then the culture is probably pretty good. If that's not happening, if the firm is not growing and is not becoming more successful and people don't have more stability and security, then no matter how many, ping pong tables you have or kegerators or, all that or whatever, or how much unlimited PTO you offer, that doesn't make for a great culture. So to me, it's not about just creating an environment of happiness. It's creating an environment of success. So if you're trying to balance the two, I mean, I get the question from the standpoint of like, you don't want to burn everybody out. There's so much that we can unpack here, because it's also from the standpoint of, if you've got the type of people and you bring in that are just savages and they just want to grow and succeed, and you're committed to a very high standard, then people are going to just thrive in that kind of environment, because A players like to work with A players.
Yeah.
And for them, they don't want to move at a slow pace, because that would be very discouraging for them. They also have things that they want to achieve in their life in terms of their personal growth and their professional growth. And, your vision needs to be able to support that as well, of like, how do they achieve what they want to achieve? I'll be completely candid. Most people don't give a shit about your vision, right? They do not care unless that is what enables them. By achieving that vision, enables them to achieve their own vision for themselves.
Exactly.
Right? So maybe they want to grow in professionally, they want to learn certain skills and capabilities, develop as leaders, whatever, right? They want to make a certain impact. Or even personally, they want to buy homes, pay off debt.
Yeah.
Again, it varies by person. But if you've created an environment that enables them to achieve their personal goals and achieve their vision, then they're probably going to be engaged, and they're not going to want to slow down. In terms of like balancing the two, I mean, look, I think it comes down to, what do you want? It's your business, and what is the rate of which you want to grow? Because how do I best put this, right? This is why we don't run ads on the podcast, right? So we can say whatever we want. There's another law firm, maybe on the other side of town, that isn't even asking this question. And they are forging ahead, and they're leveling up, and it's only a matter of time before your life becomes extremely difficult, because they will beat you in every single way. And they're just focusing on being great and delivering great service to their clients, great outcomes, leveling up their team, just growing as leaders. Like, that's where their focus is. And they're not so much thinking about, this balance and so on.
And I think back to even when you said like A players want to be around A players, when you're in this growth stage, and even still to this point with us, like, you are, as the leader, must be authentically yourself. So when you are recruiting, when you're adding people, any person I interview, I am very upfront that CRISP is not for the majority of humans out there. But that quickly derails and gets rid of the people that would not work here, but it heightens the attractiveness of CRISP to the savages who do want to be here. So I think if you're trying to compromise of like, oh, I can't be myself or whatever, like, people need to know what they're signing up for.
I look back now, and this experience, really, I'm glad we experienced it, and I'm glad we had it, but at the time I felt so inadequate and lost. So this is probably, I don't know, maybe like 7-8 years ago or so. And, we're in Atlanta, and there's so many venture-funded software SaaS companies, and they're winning all these culture awards. And it's like, everybody wants to go work at these companies, and they've got these teams, and they're constantly putting out the culture seems amazing, and they're giving everybody like brand new laptops, and they can just do whatever they want, and they got beanbag chairs. It just seems so amazing. And here we were in our tiny little office, and I'm looking over, and I'm like, gosh, like, they got it figured out. What are we doing wrong? Because we're all stressed out, and we're working hard, and we're putting a lot of pressure on people. We've got high expectations, but we're this tiny company, and we're so like irrelevant at the time. And then these are these like just companies that they're in all the publications, people are writing about them, and they're in TechCrunch, and et cetera. And you fast forward to now, and they all went out of business. All of them, every single one of them. And I look back at that, and I think, you know what? There's certain things that are good for headlines, and then there's certain things that are good for succeeding.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that if you focus on succeeding as an organization and making your people successful, you will win. That is it. Because sometimes what you're seeing, whether it's on social media or somewhere else, isn't reality. I mean, they were burning through money. They weren't profitable.
Right.
They were trying to create this environment to try to maybe do another raise, and, and just try to outrun it somehow with maybe years from now, we're going to IPO or whatever. But that never came.
Yeah.
And then when the realities of the market caught up with them, they found themselves very ill-equipped and ill-prepared with a bunch of complacent people that weren't aligned, and they were only there for the free food.
Yeah.
And instead, like, I look back and like, so many of our key people were with us, during that time. They're still with us today. And they're like, man, we went to war and back, and like, that's how we grew.
Like, when this person says 15 people, I think of like our core 15, 10, like, you're right. They have been here from day one because that's the company they signed up for.
Sometimes you just got to own who you are. You got to own it. And I remember thinking I was feeling like so lost, and I'm like, man, we're just doing this wrong. These other guys just figured it out, right? And we just doing things the harder way. Like, does it have to be this way? And now I look back and I'm like, you know what? We were doing things the responsible way, and we were consistent over time. I felt we were being judged. I mean, look, judge now, judge then, whatever. Early on, they judge you and they think you're never going to succeed because you don't have a whole lot to show for it. Then when you do succeed, they judge you and say, oh, here's the boss, here's the big guy, right?
Right.
And it's like, what happened here?
Yeah.
I thought you guys were rooting for me, right?
Yeah.
I did all the things that you were encouraging me to do, and now you achieve a level of success, and now they resent you. All right, so you're not going to win either way. So I think be true to what you want.
Yes.
And build the type of organization that you believe is necessary to be successful.
Absolutely. All right. I'm quite passionate about that one. All right. Question number 3, to round us out. I've built my firm into something I'm really proud of, but as I think about the future, I'm wondering who's next in line to take it over. My son is in law school, but isn't interested in running the business, and I have a managing attorney who's ambitious and hungry for growth. How would you decide who to hand the reins over to?
Well, it depends what you want.
Yeah.
All right. When you're thinking about succession planning, and it's, do you hand over the firm to your son who's in law school and doesn't really care about the business, or do you hand it over to a managing attorney who is passionate about the business? Like, when I say it comes down to what you want, is, well, do you want the firm to continue, and do you want it to be around for a while longer, or do you want it to just have a continuous decline and go out of business, but stay in the family?
I know a firm right off the top of my head. He had several attorneys, and his daughter was in that lineup, and she wasn't performing. He said, no, you're not getting this next cut. You're not making it any further. But it's, of course, a hard personal decision, but what's best for the business?
That's where you got to decide. It comes back to, what do you want? And sometimes what you want may not always be what's best for the business. And that's okay, because it's your business and you can do whatever the hell you want. So just know that you maintain that power. But I will say, where I've seen successful outcomes when it comes to succession planning is when it's done based on merit and based on capability. Because if you don't have confidence in the person or the people that you would be passing along the firm to, like if you don't have confidence in their ability to lead, if you don't feel that they have, they're going to take the firm to the next level versus just simply maintain it, if they don't have a deep interest in the business side of the practice, well, then they're going to really, really struggle. And it's not to say that those people, can't maintain some level of ownership within the firm or some level of accountability and so on. But let's say you don't have anyone. Maybe you need to bring in somebody else from the outside.Maybe you need to find a great operator. Again, this doesn't always have to be a lawyer. Maybe the lawyers can just be great lawyers. I was speaking with a firm owner who essentially was in a similar pickle, where he was sharing it and saying that, look, he's got, I think, over a dozen lawyers. And he's like, look, the ones that have been with me for a long time, and these old dogs, they don't have what it takes. I don't feel confident. I feel that if I'm going to pass the firm along, to someone, it's going to be our younger lawyers, because they're coming in and they're just obsessed. They're curious. They're engaged. They're learning. Like they represent the new generation. He's like, I really need to spend more time with them, right? I need to spend more time developing them, because that's where the future is, not in these, old dogs here, right? Because they're already looking for the exits, right? So if you're putting all of your eggs on someone that just isn't really thinking about the future, or maybe just thinking about their future, right? But about the future of the firm. So I think it should always be based on merit. Now, again, easier said than done. But the other thing I will say is, just let's say your son tells you they have no interest in the business. Well, that can change too. I mean, it could just how much time they spent within the business. Maybe they start to learn aspects of it. We see this happen with many of the firms we work with, where they had no interest in the business and they were just focusing on just the legal work. And then as they start to learn the various leadership principles, and whether it relates to culture and hiring and operations and so on, they're like, man, I like this. This is a fun game to play. They start to enjoy it more than even practicing law. But you're not going to fit a square peg into a round hole, because usually what happens is, if they have no interest in the business, they're not going to gain that interest. That's more than likely what's going to happen, and probably not who you want to run the business going forward, because there's nothing worse than a non-business minded person running a business. Like, you want to basically topple a business and run it into the ground. Just imagine you brought in somebody who has zero interest in business, right? Meaning that they don't think about this stuff. They don't care about this stuff. They're going to get crushed by somebody else who does.
Yeah, I actually look at that as a silver lining. You and your son both know that he has no interest. At least you know that now before you throw him in, So look at it that way.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of, interfamily just animosity, where you've got the firm owner and they're looking at their kids and they're like, I need you guys to take this over, right? I spent my whole life building it, and the kids don't want to have anything to do with it. And yet the firm owner becomes increasingly more frustrated because like, I wish they cared rather than letting them chart their own path and have their own lane. I mean, we talk about this with our kids all the time. If they want to take over Crisp and so on, number one, they're going to have to earn it all the way from the bottom up, right? But number two, they don't have to. As long as they're passionate about the work that they're doing and they're adding value or making impact in some, let's say, completely different field.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy, I'm satisfied.
Right. Yeah.
Right? They don't have to be entrepreneurs.
No.
That's completely
fine. One of
fine.
them definitely will not be an entrepreneur.
One probably will not be, but, that's what we got too.
Yeah.
Right? But even so, like, that's not for everyone.
No.
So not everyone wants to take over your business.
Right.
Right? And not everyone wants to deal with your problems.
No.
But then there's people who really do. And they really get excited about that opportunity. And I think it's making sure that if you want to feel confident in your succession planning, it is ensuring that the person really does, like, you align on values, like they're deeply interested in the growth and scale of the practice. Again, it's not limited to people who've been with you a long time. Sometimes it's people that haven't been with you that long and are just adding tremendous value into the practice that you can mentor and develop. But if you ignore this, you're going to find yourself in a situation where it's like you don't know what to do. You don't have confidence in anyone at your firm. And then you're like, well, shit, man, I got to sell it. And you sell it for pennies on the dollar just to get out. Or you pass it along to, let's say the wrong person. And now you're just frustrated in retirement because they continue to drive this thing into the ground. And you got to drive by the building every day. And it's like the lights are out,
The letters are falling down.
The letters are falling down. It's like all dusty in the windows. And you're like, ah, shit. Is this what I spent my life building? And you just get mad at them. It's not their fault, right? It's like, maybe it's not what they wanted. So that's why I would say the answer is, it depends what you want. Do you want what's right for the law firm, or do you want what's right for you personally? And sometimes those two things are the same, and sometimes they are completely different.
Exactly. And we'll leave you with that today.
All right. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Game Changing Attorney podcast with Michael Mogill. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that we can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of Michael's book absolutely free at gamechangingattorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot Michael a text at 404-531-7691 and ask him any question you'd like. You might just hear the answer on the next episode. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it will help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on this episode, see the show notes in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.